In the fall of 1993, a yellow school bus carrying 30 children vanished on a foggy road in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley. No radio contact, no tire tracks, just silence. For 31 years, their families searched for answers. But in October 2024, workers expanding a cemetery unearthed something buried beneath the southern edge, something that was never meant to be found. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe if you're drawn to true crime stories, eerie disappearances, and shocking modern-day discoveries rooted in decades-old mysteries. October 14th, 2024. Location: Rockbridge County Cemetery, Virginia. The backhoe slammed into something solid. At first, the operator thought it was a thick tree root, but when the teeth of the machine scraped again, it gave off a metallic screech. Something deeper, hollow. Not earth, not rock, metal. He killed the engine and climbed out, boots sinking slightly in the churned dirt. The wind carried the cold scent of rain and pine as he crouched beside the hole, peering into the exposed trench. The crew had been prepping a new row of plots for the cemetery's expansion. Nothing unusual. But this wasn't supposed to be here. A large, rust-colored curve of something yellow, buried under 3 feet of soil. His stomach sank as he brushed away dirt and leaves. It was a roof, a rounded one. Faded white lettering barely legible through decades of grime. School District 12. By the time the sheriff's office arrived, half the emergency vehicles in Rockbridge County were parked along the edge of the cemetery. The site was cordoned off, and reporters were already circling the perimeter like flies. Everyone in the Shenandoah Valley knew the story, even if they hadn't been alive when it happened. 30 children, 1 bus, gone. No one had ever found it. No bodies, no evidence. Just 31 years of rumors and closed caskets. And now, something was buried beneath the graveyard. The forensics team took over before sunset. Floodlights were brought in. Mud-covered boots lined the edge of the pit. The bus was almost intact, preserved better than it should have been. Welded shut from the outside. Windows blacked out. Someone had wanted it never to be found. Deputy Nolan Briggs stood silently beside the county coroner, his jaw clenched as the welders worked on the side panel. Sparks danced across the dusk. The door finally gave way with a hiss. They opened the hatch slowly, and what they saw inside turned the decades-cold case into a living nightmare. 30 seats, none of them empty. Not one, but only 29 bodies were recovered. 1 was missing. October 15th, 2024. Location: Rockbridge County Sheriff's Department. Virginia Sheriff Lucas Breyer hadn't slept. His office still smelled faintly of rain-soaked boots, burnt coffee, and crime scene mud. The blinds were shut against the harsh morning light, but it crept in anyway, slicing across the folder open on his desk. Case number 93-447, Field Trip Disappearance. The folder was dog-eared, brittle with time, the paper inside yellowed at the corners. He had grown up with this case. His own cousin, Melanie Griggs, had been one of the 30. She had been 9, bright red curls and a gap-toothed smile. The last photo taken of her was in this file, clipped to the top with a rusted paperclip. He didn't look at it anymore. He didn't need to. Instead, he stared at the photo taken last night. The bus, coated in clay and rot, emerging like a ghost from beneath the cemetery soil. Dozens of floodlights turned it into something almost theatrical, macabre and sacred all at once. They had counted 29 skeletons, buckled into seats, every one of them dressed in the same tattered remnants of the 1993 Stone Hollow Elementary field trip uniform. Red sweatshirts with white stripes on the sleeves. Faded, shrunken with time, but unmistakable. One seat had been torn loose, no remains in it, no bones, just an old locket, rusted shut, left on the vinyl. Breyer pinched the bridge of his nose. The phone rang once, twice. He answered on the third. Sheriff Breyer. Lucas, it's me. The voice on the other end was dry, tense. It's Dr. Keene. We've started processing the remains. Go on. They were sealed in, Keene said. Every window had been blacked out from the inside, spray paint mostly, and the emergency exits welded shut. From the outside, someone wanted them in that bus. Someone wanted to bury it, intentionally. Breyer swallowed the rising nausea. And the cause of death? There was a pause. Blunt trauma for most, but not immediately. There's evidence of restraint, wrist fractures, some of the smaller bones. The voice cracked. Lucas, these weren't just kids who died in a crash. They were kept there for days, maybe longer. Breyer's stomach twisted. We found marks under some of the seats, Keene added. Fingernails, scratches in the paint. Don't say it, Breyer muttered. But the forensic pathologist did anyway. They were buried alive. He hung up without another word. Across town, in the rusted outskirts of Staunton, the last surviving relative of one of the missing students sat quietly at her kitchen table. Eliza Wyatt, 42, had been only 11 when her younger brother Caleb vanished on the field trip. He had been 7. A second grader who had begged to bring his favorite green backpack with the dinosaur patches. Her mother never recovered. Her father drank himself into silence. Eliza never left town. Now, 31 years later, she was staring at a television report playing on mute. Footage of the crime scene, yellow caution tape flapping in the wind, and the edge of a corroded school bus protruding from a deep trench. The caption read, Breaking, 1993 school bus discovered under cemetery, 29 bodies recovered. But Eliza was staring at something else. On the screen, paused in perfect clarity, was an overhead shot from the news drone. The roof of the bus, the rust patterns, and scratched into the top, in faint, jagged lettering barely visible in the clay-stained metal. Help us, Caleb! She pressed her fingers to her mouth, trying not to scream. October 15th, 2024. Location, Rockbridge County Cemetery, Virginia. By late afternoon, the cemetery had been transformed into a controlled crime scene. Yellow police tape fluttered in the cold wind, staked in a wide perimeter that cordoned off rows of headstones. White tents had gone up. Floodlights on generators buzzed in anticipation of nightfall. The bus, half exhumed, protruded from the earth like a rotted tooth. Detective Margot Hale adjusted the collar of her jacket and stepped carefully around the trench, boots squelching in the mud. Her forensic team worked quietly but deliberately, brushing clay off the twisted shell of the vehicle, logging each recovered item with the reverence usually reserved for battlefield graves. She crouched beside one of the open side doors. The vehicle had been expertly sealed. The emergency exits had been welded shut. Windows painted black from the inside. Whoever had done this had planned it. Not in panic, not in haste, but with time, tools, and a horrifying sense of purpose. One of the techs, Sanchez, emerged from the bus, pale beneath his hood. We pulled 29 skeletons, he said quietly. All children, some still buckled in. Margot's stomach turned. Clothing? Fragments of sweatshirts, all matching. Stone Hollow Elementary, red with white stripes. Same year as the disappearance. She nodded, jaw tight. Any sign of the 30th? Seat 4C was torn loose. That's where we found this. He held out a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a delicate brass locket, dirt-stained but intact. It had been wrapped in what remained of a sock and stuffed beneath the seat. Margot took it gently, turning it over. A faint inscription ran along the edge, nearly worn smooth by time and friction. For my brave boy. Love. Mom. Later that evening, back at the regional forensics lab, the evidence from the bus was laid out beneath white fluorescent lights. Hair ties, A broken wristwatch stopped at 12:41. A melted crayon box. One by one, the techs cataloged them. None spoke unless necessary. In the far corner of the lab, an old cassette tape sat in an open evidence bag. It had been found under Seat 2C, wrapped in fabric and lodged inside a compartment behind the heater grate. Somehow, after 30 years underground, it had survived. The tape was fed into a refurbished deck, and the team gathered around the glass of the observation window as the first hiss of static crackled from the speakers. Then, a child's voice. It was faint, trembling, a whisper layered beneath white noise. "It's been 4 days, maybe, I think. The driver's gone. The man came back last night. He had a flashlight. We're not supposed to talk anymore, but Caleb wouldn't stop crying. He took him out the back and welded it shut." Someone in the room gasped. There was a long pause on the tape, then more whispering. "We're under something. I think it's dirt. No light. Can't breathe right. Jonah's coughing up blood. Please, please help us, please." The tape clicked off. No one moved. Margot stared at the deck. The silence that followed felt louder than the recording itself. The kids had begged, whispered for help into the dark. And no one had been listening. Not until now. Across town, Eliza Wyatt sat alone at her kitchen table, the news playing softly in the background. Her coffee had long since gone cold. The drone footage from the cemetery showed the rusted curve of the bus roof just visible in the dirt. But it wasn't the bus that held her attention. It was what was etched, barely, in the metal skin of the roof. She had paused the screen 3 times to be sure, zoomed in, adjusted the contrast. There it was. "Help us, Caleb." The letters had been scratched with something sharp, uneven, desperate, but unmistakable. Eliza pressed her hand to her mouth. Her younger brother had vanished with that bus 31 years ago. He was 7, 2nd grade, too small to defend himself, too trusting to run. She remembered the dinosaur backpack he loved, the tears he cried the night before the trip, the name he had whispered in her room, voice shaking. "I don't want to go if Mr. Harlan's driving." She hadn't thought of it in years. She hadn't wanted to. The knock came just after sunset. When Eliza opened the door, the woman standing on her porch was dressed in plain clothes but wore a badge clipped to her belt. Her hair was dark and pinned back, her eyes sharp but not unkind. "Eliza Wyatt?" she asked. "Yes." "I'm Detective Margot Hale. May I come in?" Eliza stepped aside, numb, and gestured to the kitchen. The detective walked in quietly, her eyes scanning the surroundings the way investigators always do. "I need to ask you about your brother," she said. "Caleb Wyatt. You're the only immediate family still in the area." Eliza nodded. Her voice felt like sandpaper. "I saw the drone footage. I saw his name." "That was real," Hale confirmed. "We also found a cassette tape, one of the voices on it. Well, we're running it through archives, but we think it might be Caleb." Eliza sat down, her legs no longer steady. "He was 7. I don't know if he even knew how to use a tape recorder." "Someone helped him," Margot said, "or at least hid it where it wouldn't be found." They sat in silence a moment longer. Then Eliza said the name she hadn't said aloud in over 3 decades. "Dale Harlan." Hale tilted her head. "Eliza, who is that?" "He was a substitute driver, sometimes helped the school on field trips. Quiet, always around, even when he didn't have to be. The night before the trip, Caleb said he was scared because Harlan was going to drive the bus. He cried, didn't want to go. I told him to sleep. I told him it'd be fine." She wiped her eyes. "I never told anyone that." The detective didn't respond right away. Then she stood slowly. "Eliza, I need you to write that name down. We'll start there." By the time Hale returned to the sheriff's department, night had settled over Rockbridge County. The bus was still in the ground, illuminated by white light, half unearthed like a warning. She walked back to the mobile command post and wrote a single name across the center of the whiteboard: Dale Harlan. Then, underneath it, in red, "Still at large?" She stared at it for a long time, the hum of the floodlights vibrating in her chest. 29 children had died in that bus. 1 had disappeared. And now, someone out there, someone alive, had buried it beneath a cemetery. She didn't know how yet, but she intended to find out. October 16th, 2024. Location: Rockbridge County Sheriff's Department, Virginia. The station conference room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the projector fan and the occasional shuffle of papers. Sheriff Lucas Breyer stood at the front of the room, his sleeves rolled, eyes bloodshot, pointing toward a grainy image frozen on the projection screen. It showed a man in his late 20s, lanky build, pale eyes, and a tightly clenched jaw. Dale Harlan. The photo was pulled from a 1993 staff directory at Stone Hollow Elementary, found deep in the town archives. He wasn't listed as a teacher, not even a full-time employee, just a contracted driver who had been used for extracurricular routes and field trips when the regular staff was unavailable. No social media, no digital footprint, not even a valid license in the DMV system after 2004. It was like he'd vanished. Breyer turned to his team. "We now have credible testimony linking Harlan to the bus the morning it disappeared. The sister of Caleb Wyatt, one of the still missing children, remembers her brother crying about him the night before the trip. Detective Hale confirmed it yesterday." A low murmur of voices passed between the officers seated around the table. Detective Hale stood beside the projector, flipping to the next slide. It was a scanned maintenance form, dated October 20th, 1993, 5 days after the children vanished. "This came from the old district storage building," she said. "It shows that Harlan reported a flat tire on a district bus 5 days after the disappearance. The same bus was supposedly off the books. This form shouldn't exist, and no one knows who signed off on it." She paused. "The handwriting on the report matches Harlan's known signature on his DMV record, meaning he was driving the bus after it was supposedly abducted." Breyer added, "It wasn't taken. It was moved." They all knew what that meant. Someone had kept that bus hidden, maybe for days, maybe longer, then buried it. Later that day, Eliza Wyatt stood alone in her parents' backyard, staring at the rusted swing set where Caleb used to play. Weeds had overtaken the garden, and the apple tree by the fence hadn't borne fruit in years. She hadn't been back here in over a decade. Detective Hale arrived quietly, her government-issue SUV pulling into the gravel drive without ceremony. Eliza didn't turn to greet her. She just said, "There's something else I haven't told anyone." Hale stepped beside her. "Go on." "The day after the bus disappeared, I found Caleb's notebook tucked behind the TV, like he didn't want Mom and Dad to see it. I was too scared to tell anyone. I hid it in a box under my bed. It's still there." Minutes later, they sat on the floor of Eliza's childhood bedroom, the mattress stripped bare, the air thick with dust and old grief. She reached beneath the box springs and pulled out a battered tin lunchbox. Inside was a spiral-bound notebook with a torn cover. The name Caleb W. was written in crayon on the first page. Hale opened it gently. Near the back, wedged between drawings of dinosaurs and stick figures, was a page written in shaky, oversized lettering. "Mr. H watches us when he's not driving. He sits in his truck. He talks to someone on a walkie-talkie. I saw him give candy to Mason when Mason was alone. I didn't take any. I pretended I was asleep. He smells like burnt wires." Hale stared at the page, her fingers clenched. "Eliza," she said quietly, "this could change everything." By the end of the week, a search warrant was issued for Dale Harlan, now believed to be living off-grid in a rural stretch of western North Carolina under an assumed name. State police and federal agents were already en route. But just as Hale was preparing to join the task force, her phone buzzed with a new call from the crime scene. It was Sanchez. "Margot," he said breathlessly. "You need to get back here. The team just broke into the last row of the bus." "What did you find?" There was a pause. "You're not going to believe this. There's something behind the rear wall. A false panel. We almost missed it. There's a second compartment." Hale's pulse spiked. "Is there a body? Number?" "But there's a name carved into the back metal. With a nail or something. 2 words." He hesitated. "What does it say?" she demanded. "It says, 'Still breathing.'" October 17th, 2024. Location: Rockbridge County Cemetery, Virginia. The back of the bus had been gutted. Its original emergency exit wall concealed a false panel of rusted aluminum. Once breached, the interior revealed a narrow, steel-lined crawl space no more than 4 feet high, sealed tight from within. No seats, no windows, no insulation, just walls scratched to hell and a rank, sealed air that hadn't moved in over 30 years. Margot Hale ducked inside with a flashlight, her breath misting in the chilled air. The writing was there, low to the floor, jagged, uneven. Still breathing. Someone had carved it from inside, clumsily, desperately, overlapping strokes that cut deep into the paneling. Below it, the light caught something else. A pair of small, rusted handcuffs, still bolted to the frame. One was closed, the other open. And scratched into the steel just beneath them, a faint set of initials. C.W. Hale stared. "Caleb Wyatt," she whispered. By late morning, the press had latched onto the phrase like a shark to blood. Still breathing was everywhere, from local news banners to national true crime podcasts, scrambling to dissect every possibility. Speculation turned viral. Was Caleb alive? Had he escaped? Had someone rescued him? But inside the command tent, reality felt heavier. "This was a holding cell," Hale said flatly, pointing to the false wall on a projected photo. "He was separated from the others, likely toward the end, after the rest were already gone." "Why spare him?" Sheriff Breyer asked, arms crossed. "I don't think he was spared," Hale replied. "I think he was taken. Alive." One of the deputies, a young analyst named Rowley, stepped forward with a fresh printout. "We just finished the thermal scan and LiDAR mapping of the surrounding soil layers. There's something else buried back there, about 20 feet southwest of the bus, long rectangular shape, consistent with a shipping container." Breyer blinked. "Underground?" "Yeah, 8 feet down, not listed on any records." Hale didn't hesitate. "Dig it." By afternoon, a second dig had begun, carefully excavating toward the anomaly. Dirt was moved inch by inch to preserve potential evidence. A perimeter was secured tighter than before. Hale stood near the trench's edge, watching silently as the backhoe operator carefully peeled back the last layers of soil. Then the edge of something metallic broke the surface. It wasn't a bus. It was a shipping container. Gray, sealed, padlocked. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Hale descended into the pit herself, knees hitting the packed soil as she moved toward the door. The lock was rusted but intact. She gestured to Sanchez, who moved in with bolt cutters. The padlock snapped. As the container creaked open, a wave of damp, stale air escaped, a mixture of mildew, dust, and something else. Something older. Something wrong. The flashlight beam swept across the interior. The floor was layered with matted blankets. Rat droppings. A few broken toys, none newer than 1993. A child's shoe lay on its side, molded and collapsed from time, and on the far wall, in a corner scratched with gouge marks, was a name. Not carved this time. Drawn. In faded, smeared ink. Caleb. That evening, back in Staunton, Eliza Wyatt sat on her couch with the notebook in her lap. She hadn't let go of it since turning it over to Hale. Not completely. Something in her wouldn't allow it to be boxed away. Not yet. When her landline rang, she answered on the first ring. "Eliza," Hale's voice came through, calm but strained. "I'm here. We found something else. Another structure, underground, a container. It looks like someone may have kept him there after the bus was buried." Eliza didn't speak. Her heart was pounding too loud in her ears. "There were signs of life," Hale continued. "Blankets, personal items, food wrappers, from the early 90s, but no body, no remains." Eliza whispered, "Do you think he got out?" "I think someone took him," Hale replied. "Moved him. Maybe weeks later, maybe years. But there's something else, something we haven't told the media yet." She paused. "Eliza, there were recent footprints outside the site." Eliza stood up, her voice cracking. "You mean recently?" "Yes, at the cemetery. Someone's been going there, possibly even checking on the site. We're reviewing surveillance now, but if Caleb survived, someone didn't want us to know." Eliza felt her knees give. She sank to the floor, notebook in hand, and for the first time since she was 11 years old, she felt something flicker. Hope. October 18th, 2024. Location: Shenandoah County, Virginia. Archive Annex, closed records room. Detective Margot Hale stood under flickering fluorescent lights, deep in the basement of a building that no longer had a name on the door. The old county records annex smelled like mold and heat tape, lined floor to ceiling with faded gray file drawers, each filled with forgotten paper. The clerk had led her down here after the computer systems offered nothing. No digital trail. Just one note in the margin of an old payroll ledger that read, "Harlan, Dale, adjunct driver, restricted clearance, contracted 1992 to 1993. Restricted clearance. She found the drawer marked School District 12, Transportation and Security, and yanked it open. The files inside were damp, some curled with mildew. But halfway back she found one thick manila envelope, stamped with a faded red warning. "Confidential. Authorized personnel only reviewed. November 1993. Sealed December 1995. Her gloves were already on. She slid the envelope free, took it to the metal table beneath the humming light, and opened it. Inside were photocopies of incident reports, all unfiled, all unofficial, all bearing the same name in the subject field, Dale Edwin Harlan. There were complaints, 5 of them, from staff, 2 from parents, 1 anonymous from a student's older sibling. The oldest was dated March 17th, 1993. "Mr. Harlan has been seen sitting in his parked vehicle for hours after his routes are complete. Students report he sometimes shows up early, circling the school. He claims he's watching traffic, but he's been seen speaking to kids through the fence. One parent reported that her daughter refused to ride the bus anymore after Harlan substituted on Route 7. She said he smelled like metal and smoke, and whispered to himself while driving. But every report ended the same way. No further action taken. Contract temporary. Issue closed. No one had done anything." Hale's hands curled into fists. She gathered the file, scanned the pages, and slid them into her satchel. On the way back up the stairs, she passed the old break room. A light was on. A dusty vending machine blinked in the corner. She stopped. The side of the machine, barely visible behind the table, had been scratched. Childlike lettering, carved long ago. "He watches from the trees." Later that night at the sheriff's department, Hale spread the documents across the table in the war room. The team leaned in. Rowley looked sick. "These reports were never filed with the district attorney," she said. "There were red flags. Kids were scared. Staff complained. Nothing was done." Sheriff Breyer shook his head. "So we've got motive, access, prior complaints, And now, he's missing, off-grid. No official record since 2004. Hale pointed to a detail on the final page. There's more. He was caught on camera at a gas station near Shenandoah Ridge in 2013. Alone. Paid cash. But here's the kicker. He had a child in the passenger seat. About 12 years old. The footage wasn't flagged because Harlan wasn't a person of interest then. Breyer's jaw tensed. And no one followed up? Nope. The footage was dumped to long-term storage, never reviewed. Rowley stared at the still frame on Hale's laptop. You think that was Caleb? I think it might have been, Hale said. And if it was, he would have been about 23 by now. That sighting was over a decade ago. Breyer glanced toward the window. The cemetery was just out of view beyond the hill, but everyone in the room could feel it. Where the hell is he now? Just before midnight, 30 miles away, a motion-activated wildlife camera mounted to a pine tree near the cemetery blinked red. It had been hidden in the woods behind the perimeter, placed after the discovery of fresh footprints near the trench. A cheap hunting model, barely functioning, but it snapped 3 images in quick succession. Frame 1, the edge of the tree line, blurred shadow. Frame 2, a figure, hooded, watching the crime scene. Frame 3, the figure vanishing into the dark, head turned slightly toward the camera, the face partially visible. In the image, the eyes are wide, unblinking, and they look exactly like the boy in the photograph pinned to the old case file. Caleb Wyatt, age 7. October 19th, 2024. Location: Rockbridge County Sheriff's Department, Virginia. The photo was grainy, taken under moonlight and infrared. But when Hale zoomed in on the third frame, the resemblance was undeniable. The same almond-shaped eyes, the slight dimple in the chin. More mature, gaunt, but unmistakable. Caleb Wyatt, alive, watching his own crime scene. The image sat at the center of the command room table now, surrounded by 4 silent figures. Detective Hale, Sheriff Breyer, Deputy Rowley, and a visiting FBI liaison flown in that morning from Richmond. Do we know when this was taken? The agent asked. Last night. Camera time stamped it at 11:12 p.m., behind the west slope of the cemetery. Breyer exhaled through his nose. He's been coming back. Probably for years. To what? Rowley asked. To visit the others, or to make sure they stayed buried? Nobody answered. Hale finally said what no one else dared. We have to consider the possibility that Caleb isn't just a survivor. He may have been involved. Breyer shook his head slowly. He was 7. He was taken when he was 7, Hale replied, her voice flat. What's he been since? By late morning, Hale and the FBI agent arrived at Eliza Wyatt's house. She had been waiting on the porch, dressed in a worn flannel jacket, coffee growing cold in her hands. Her face was pale. Her fingers trembled slightly. I saw the picture on the news, she said before either of them spoke. They didn't show his face. But I knew. Then you believe it's him, Hale said gently. I do. The FBI agent introduced himself as Agent Lowell and asked to come inside. Eliza nodded. They sat around the kitchen table, where a framed school photo of Caleb still sat beside a half-burned candle. The boy in the image was frozen in time, missing teeth, smiling too wide for the camera. He had no idea what was coming. I have to ask, Lowell began. Was there ever any possibility someone in your family helped hide him? Eliza blinked. What? It's a standard question, Hale clarified. We have to rule out all options. My family. We died after that bus disappeared, she said quietly. My mother tried to drink herself to death. My dad stopped speaking. We weren't a family anymore. Her voice cracked. I would have given anything to see him again. Hale placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Then we need your help, she said. We think he's alive, but we don't know who he is now. We don't know if he's hiding or if he's hunting. Later that afternoon, A team was sent to recover the wildlife camera and canvass the forest behind the cemetery. They found a trail, faint, overgrown, but deliberate. Twigs snapped in uniform intervals. Rocks placed to guide footsteps. It led west, beyond the cemetery fence, down a wooded slope, and toward a rusted chain-link fence nearly buried in ivy. On the other side, a narrow dirt road led into dense forest, and halfway down that road, tucked behind thick brush and a collapsed billboard, they found it, an abandoned hunting cabin. The windows were blacked out, the front door chained shut. No electricity, no sign of recent vehicle tracks. But near the porch, half covered by wet leaves, were 2 size 11 boot prints. Inside, the air was dry, still, cold. The walls had been stripped to studs. In the center of the main room sat an overturned crate and a blanket. There were no electronics, no food. Just a single gas lantern, long extinguished, but scratched into the wood near the corner, written with something sharp and desperate, was one final message. I remember who you are. That night, Hale couldn't sleep. She sat in her motel room near the interstate, the case files spread across the bed, newspaper clippings, photos, audio transcripts from the cassette tape, a drawing that had once belonged to Caleb, crayon on construction paper, a green dinosaur wearing a backpack. In the corner, CW. Her phone buzzed at 2:41 a.m. She answered instantly. It was Rowley. His voice was tight. We ran facial recognition against the wildlife cam photo, pulled a partial match from a hospital security feed in Charlottesville 5 months ago. Where? Outside the emergency room. A man dropped off a young woman, overdosed, left her on the sidewalk and vanished before staff got a plate number. Cameras caught him leaving. You're sure it's him? 91% match. And Margot. He was carrying something, a backpack. Dinosaur patch. Green Hale sat up, her heart pounding. He never let it go. October 20th, 2024. Location: Charlottesville General Hospital, Virginia. The hospital security room smelled like burnt coffee and stale popcorn. Monitors lined the wall in a grid of surveillance feeds, most showing empty hallways or quiet waiting rooms. But one screen was paused, grainy and time-stamped 5 months earlier. Hale leaned forward as the technician replayed the footage. A dim-lit side entrance. Rain falling in sheets. A man, mid-30s, soaked and hooded, steps out of the shadows carrying a woman in his arms. She appears unconscious, pale, her limbs slack. He kneels, sets her gently beneath the overhang, checks her pulse, then backs away. For a moment, he looks up toward the security camera. Just a second. It's enough. His face, hollowed cheeks, sunken eyes, but unmistakably Caleb Wyatt. Grown, weathered, haunted, and strapped to his back, a torn canvas pack with a peeling green dinosaur patch. Hale swallowed hard. The technician advanced the footage. Caleb turned and disappeared into the storm before any hospital staff arrived. No vehicle, no ID, no trace. You said the girl survived? Hale asked. The technician nodded. Barely. No name. She gave a fake address and disappeared before she could be discharged. Any security footage of where she went? Nothing. She left through the main lobby in different clothes. Like someone gave her a change. Did she ever speak Caleb's name? The technician hesitated, then tapped a keyboard. A short audio file played, recorded during triage. A nurse's voice. Sweetie, what's your name? The girl, barely conscious, whispering, He told me to call him 9. Back at the sheriff's department later that morning, Hale stood at the incident board, drawing a new line in red between 2 faces. Young Caleb Wyatt, age 7, and the adult figure from the wildlife cam and hospital footage. Beside them, a third blank space. A silhouette. The girl. Agent Lowell stepped in, holding a folder. We ran the prints from the hunting cabin. Nothing in the system, but the footprint match is a high-confidence hit for a pair of boots sold only to correctional facilities and federal surplus outfits. You think he stole them? No, Lowell said. I think someone gave them to him. Someone who knew where he was. Hale turned to face him. You think someone's been helping him this whole time? Or keeping tabs. Either way, he didn't survive alone. Rowley entered the room next, holding a new report. We've got more. He laid a sheet on the table. It was a still from a gas station security camera, off Route 250, dated just 3 weeks ago. Caleb, same face, same bag, buying canned soup and water. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, partially obscured, was a young boy, no older than 8. Dark hair, thin, wearing an oversized hoodie and no shoes. Who the hell is that? Breyer muttered. Hale answered softly, eyes locked on the boy's face. Someone new, someone he's hiding. That evening, Eliza Wyatt sat alone on her back porch, bundled in a heavy sweater, watching the tree lines sway beneath the wind. She thought of her brother, of the boy who used to run through that yard chasing fireflies, of the laugh that faded like smoke after the day the bus disappeared. Now she didn't know who he was. A ghost? A rescuer? A survivor hiding from something darker than memory? Or a man who had become part of the machine that broke him? The woods had swallowed so much. Now they were giving it back, one secret at a time. A knock broke the quiet. She turned. Standing at the edge of her porch was Detective Hale. Rain flecked her jacket. Her face looked carved from stone. I need you to come with me, Hale said gently. Why? We think Caleb's alive, Hale replied, and we think he has a child with him. Eliza stood, her pulse roaring in her ears. His child? We don't know yet, Hale said, but we believe he's been protecting this kid, moving him between shelters, off-grid hideouts, maybe even the way he wished someone had done for him. Eliza's voice caught. Do you think he's still in Virginia? Hale nodded. We've narrowed it to a 10-mile radius. That night, Caleb Wyatt stood deep in the forest beneath a veil of branches and fog, flashlight off, breathing through the damp silence. Beside him, a child held his hand. Small, silent. The boy's eyes were wide as they stared through a break in the trees toward the cemetery lights flickering beyond the hill. Flashlights, voices, the cold buzz of radio chatter. Caleb pulled the boy closer. They're getting too close, he whispered. The boy said nothing. Tomorrow, Caleb said. We move again. He looked down at the pack on the boy's shoulders. His old one. The green dinosaur patch barely clung to the fabric. October 21st, 2024. Location: Shenandoah Valley, Virginia. Northern Ridge Sector, dawn. Broke with a pale, colorless sky as agents deployed into the foothills west of the cemetery. The search radius had narrowed overnight after thermal drones picked up 2 heat signatures just beyond the power line corridor. No roads, no structures, only dense timber and rock. The coordinates matched a part of the forest that had burned in a 2002 wildfire. The area had never been rebuilt. Detective Hale stood beside the mobile command vehicle, arms folded tightly against the cold. Her eyes were fixed on the screen mounted to the side of the van, which showed the faint heat trail, a residual signature of 2 bodies traveling east through the trees, just before 3 a.m. They were moving. Again. A team of 6 agents, including Hale, geared up and moved out on foot, radios clipped to their shoulders, boots crunching through frost-covered leaves. The forest swallowed them quickly. Bird song and wind replaced the hum of vehicles. The deeper they pushed, the quieter it became. 20 minutes in, they found the first sign. A makeshift lean-to constructed of pine branches and tarp, recently abandoned. Inside, the dirt was still warm. A half-eaten protein bar lay near the edge of a bedroll. Under it, a crumpled child's drawing in charcoal on scrap cardboard. A boy holding hands with a taller figure, a sun overhead. And beside them, in stick figure writing, "Me plus him, not going back." Hale pocketed it and signaled the others forward. Far ahead, beneath a jagged rock shelf near the edge of an old quarry, Caleb watched the forest from a perch carved into the cliffside. He wasn't wearing camouflage. He didn't need to. His entire life had been hiding. The boy sat beside him, tucked under a heavy coat, face pale but alert. Caleb handed him a granola bar. "Eat, slowly." The boy looked up, anxious. "Are they going to find us?" Caleb glanced at the tree line below. "They always do. Eventually. Then what?" "Then I take the blame." The boy's lip trembled. "But you didn't do anything." Caleb smiled bitterly. "That's not how the world works." By late morning, Hale's team reached the edge of the quarry. The wind changed direction, and with it came a scent. Smoke. She froze. "Sanchez," she said, lowering her voice. "You smell that?" He nodded. "Fire, small one." They moved as one, silent and deliberate, rounding the upper slope. Then a sound, small feet crunching rock, a sharp intake of breath. Hale raised her voice, calm and even. "Caleb, it's Margot Hale. I'm with law enforcement. We're not here to hurt you or the boy." Silence, then movement. From the mouth of the rocky ledge, a child stepped out. Alone. Hands raised. 8 years old. Dark hair, thin. Wearing an oversized coat. His eyes darted between the agents, terrified, cornered. "I'm Thomas," he said quietly. Hale took a cautious step forward. "Are you hurt, Thomas?" He shook his head. "Is Caleb with you?" The boy nodded slowly. "He said he was going to give you time. He wanted me to be safe." Hale's heart dropped. "Where is he now?" The boy pointed up, toward the ridge crest behind them. Caleb watched from the bluff, hidden between two collapsed boulders. He could see them, see her. The detective, the same one who stood at the trench when they pulled the bus from the ground. She was kind. He'd watched her. She hadn't looked away when they found the handcuffs, or the locket, or the tape recorder. She had listened. He slipped his hand into his coat pocket and pulled out the old Polaroid. It was worn thin from decades of handling. Caleb at age 7, sitting on the school steps beside a group of other kids, all of them smiling, all of them gone, except him, and maybe one more. He stood slowly, the wind catching his hood, and stepped into the open. "Contact!" someone shouted. Weapons were raised. "No!" Hale snapped. "Stand down!" Caleb raised both hands in the air. His face was gaunt, beard patchy, clothes too large for his wiry frame. But his eyes, they were still the same. She approached carefully, stopping 10 feet away. "Caleb Wyatt?" He nodded. "I'm Detective Hale. You don't have to run anymore." His voice, when it came, was dry and hoarse. "I'm not running. I'm surrendering, but not for what you think." "Then help me understand." He nodded toward Thomas. "He's not mine. He was going to be taken, like we were. I stopped it." "Taken by who?" Caleb didn't answer right away. Then, "It wasn't just Harlan. He was just the driver. There were others. They used the bus as cover. That day, it wasn't a field trip. It was a pickup. They knew the route. They planned it for months." Hale's skin prickled. "Where did they take you?" He looked past her toward the boy. Places that shouldn't exist. By nightfall, Caleb Wyatt was in custody. Thomas was taken into protective care. And for the first time in 31 years, the last survivor of the Stone Hollow Elementary bus case sat under federal guard, alive, lucid, and ready to talk. But as Hale watched him through the glass of the interrogation room, a deeper dread gnawed at her. Because if Caleb was telling the truth, then someone else, someone far more powerful than Dale Harlan, had orchestrated it all. And they were still out there. October 22nd, 2024. Location, Federal Detention Facility, Richmond, Virginia. The room was cold, deliberately so. Caleb Wyatt sat beneath flickering fluorescent lights, his hands resting on the steel table, palms up. Calm, exposed. His cuffs had been removed. The room had no clock, no windows, just a camera blinking red in the corner and a manila folder in front of him, untouched. Across the table, Detective Margot Hale sat with a legal pad and a worn pencil. She hadn't brought a laptop. She didn't want this recorded in bits and bytes. She wanted it in her hands, in her handwriting. Caleb spoke first. There was never a detour. Hale blinked. Excuse me? The day we disappeared. The driver didn't miss the turn. He was told to keep going. He had directions. They gave him a two-way radio and told him where to take us. Who's they? Caleb. He exhaled slowly. Adults. Different ones. I don't know all their names. Some wore maintenance uniforms. One man had a janitor's key ring clipped to his belt. They called each other by numbers, not names. I remember 6 and 12. They gave Mr. Harlan a key to the access road. Hale felt a chill move through her. The access road where the bus was buried? Caleb nodded. They were already digging when we got there. They had lights, concrete, welding gear. Like they'd done it before, she leaned in, voice low. Did you know them from school? From town? No, they weren't from here, but some of the teachers, I think they knew, or at least suspected. One of them tried to stop it. She didn't show up that day. She quit the next week. They called her a hysteric and sent her away. Do you know her name? I just remember her as Miss Ashby. She was young, brown hair. She cried when we did spelling drills. Hale jotted the name down. She'd have someone track it immediately. Why you, Caleb? Why the bus? I don't know, he said. We were just convenient. A rural school. One working camera. No guards. No cell service. They made it look like a disappearance, but it was a handoff. Hale hesitated. You said earlier that someone else was behind this. Not Harlan, not the locals. Who? Caleb's eyes darkened. They called it the Orchard. What is that? I don't know exactly, but I saw a map once, after we were split up. There were other sites, other dates. They were organized, like they'd done this in different states. He paused, voice hollow. We weren't the first bus. That afternoon, Eliza Wyatt was escorted into a private room at the facility. She had requested the meeting. Hale warned her not to expect answers, at least not the ones she wanted. But Eliza didn't care. She just wanted to see him. The door opened, and Caleb entered, hands unclasped, escorted by 2 marshals. They left without a word, leaving the siblings alone. Eliza stood. He didn't recognize her at first. Then, her eyes, her hands. Eliza, he whispered. She nodded, swallowing her grief. You still bite your lip when you're nervous, she said softly. He smiled, barely. She walked toward him and embraced him. His frame was thin, shoulders rigid, like he hadn't been held in years. Maybe he hadn't. When she stepped back, her voice cracked. Why didn't you come home? I didn't know how, he whispered. I wasn't the same, and I didn't want you to see what they made me into. You're still my brother. No, I'm what they left behind. That night, in a separate federal building, Agent Lowell briefed a team of DOJ investigators. Hale was there. So wore Sheriff Breyer. On the board behind them was a single phrase in red. Project Orchard, 1991 to question mark. Caleb's statement had opened a Pandora's box. Mentions of other pickups, unexplained disappearances near rest stops, daycares, juvenile shelters, locations where children vanished under the guise of bureaucracy, natural disaster, or accident. Most of them had never been linked, until now. Lowell pointed to a 1991 case in Kentucky. Then a 1995 disappearance of 2 vans full of foster kids en route to a group home. Then again in Colorado, 1999. All poorly documented, all unsolved, all involving transit, all vanished during transport. They used public systems, Lowell said. Buses, shuttles, field trips, things no one watched closely. Everything they did was designed to look like failure. Who ran it? Breyer asked. Lowell's expression was grim. We don't know yet, but it wasn't just criminals. This was coordinated, covered. Someone at the top signed off. Hale stared at the board. How many kids, Agent? Lowell looked down. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Back in his cell, Caleb sat on the cot, holding the old dinosaur backpack. It had been returned to him after evidence review. He kept it like a relic, the only thing that had survived with him. Inside it was the Polaroid, the one of the school steps, the smiling kids. He traced each face with his finger, whispered their names, everyone he could remember, and when he got to the last spot, the empty space where he used to be, he whispered, I came back. October 23rd, 2024. Location, Shenandoah. Regional Library, Archives Division. Detective Margot Hale sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by boxes of microfilm and dust-choked ledgers, lit only by the warm flicker of an ancient desk lamp. She had returned to the place where the earliest school district records were held. Not digital, not indexed. Just paper, forgotten, hidden in plain sight. She wasn't looking for Caleb anymore. She was looking for Project Orchard. And somewhere between the minutes of a 1991 school board meeting and an unsigned transportation contract from 1993, she found it. A one-page agreement tucked between bus maintenance logs. Temporary transport reassignment, all routing subject to adjustment based on Orchard clearance. Authorized by S. Devereaux, Regional Logistics Consultant. Effective dates, September 20th, 1993. October 15th, 1993. Number of riders, 30. Special handling, yes disposal method. To be determined. There were no school names, no logos, no signatures that matched public records. It didn't belong in the file. It shouldn't have existed at all. Later that morning, Hale brought the document to Agent Lowell at the Federal Task Force office. He read it 3 times in silence, mouth tightening at the final line. TBD, he muttered. Disposal. Like they were cargo, Hale said coldly. Not children. Lowell picked up a different folder and laid it beside hers. It was a compiled witness report from a 1995 disappearance in Colorado. 12 kids vanished from a temporary foster facility during a reassignment to another group home. Guess who had signed the transport order? S. Devereaux. Same title, same phrasing, and same effective window, only 1 week long. Same abbreviation, Orch Clee. Lowell leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed. This wasn't trafficking in the traditional sense. This was administrative, paper-made, orchestrated through legal systems. Hale stared at the map of overlapping transport disappearances pinned to the back wall. They hid it in routine. Meanwhile, back at the Richmond facility, Caleb sat in the interrogation room with a sketch pad. He hadn't asked for a lawyer, just pencils and silence. He drew bus windows, lock panels, a cassette tape, a child's eyes, a woman's gloved hands. Each image was clinical, perfect, as if branded into him. Then he drew the orchard. Rows and rows of skeletal trees, twisted and bare, stretching into the fog. A dark figure stood at the edge of the rows, a man in a suit, faceless, holding a clipboard. In the corner of the page, Caleb wrote, "They took us to pick what they could use. Then they burned the trees." That evening, Eliza Wyatt was escorted into the facility again. This time not to see Caleb, but to speak with Thomas. The boy sat quietly at a small table, knees pulled to his chest. He'd refused therapy, refused meals from anyone in uniform. But when Eliza walked in, he lifted his head. "I know you," he said. "You do? You're his sister." She smiled softly. "That's right." He hesitated, then whispered, "He told me you used to braid his hair when he was scared." Eliza nearly broke. "He said you were the only one who never lied to him." She knelt beside him, steadying her voice. "Did he ever tell you what they did to him?" Thomas nodded. "He said they made him forget his name for a long time. Made him watch tapes, made him pretend to be other kids." Eliza blinked. "What kind of tapes?" "He said they were training kids for places where they couldn't have cameras." Her stomach turned. "Places like what?" Thomas shook his head. "He wouldn't say, only that he got away, but not before they used him up." That night, the DOJ launched sealed subpoenas for transportation records across 5 states dating back to 1990. Agent Lowell flew to D.C. to brief Homeland Security. Hale remained in Richmond, sitting outside the cell block, watching Caleb through the reinforced glass as he slept, curled up on his side, clutching the green dinosaur backpack like a life vest. He twitched occasionally, whimpered once, and then, for a moment, his eyes snapped open and met hers through the glass. He didn't flinch, didn't look away, just stared, and whispered something she couldn't hear. Hale stood and approached, gently pressing her fingers to the intercom button. "What did you say?" Caleb's voice came through the speaker, quiet, hollow. "They're going to make it look like I made it all up." October 24th, 2024. Location: Federal Detention Facility, Richmond, Virginia. They cut the power at 3:12 a.m. The hallway lights flickered once, then died. Backup generators kicked in a full 6 seconds later. Too late. The camera feeds blinked off, scrambled, then rebooted into static. When the monitors came back online, Caleb Wyatt's cell was empty. There was no forced entry, no broken locks, no signs of struggle. Just one thing left on the cot: the Polaroid. Still warm. 3 hours earlier, Caleb had asked for a glass of water. Nothing unusual. Routine. The guard who brought it in was new, young, nervous. He wore a patch on his sleeve that read, "Northern Facility Temp Transfer." Later, that same uniform would be found in a maintenance closet. Empty, no prints, no ID. Just a black lanyard tucked inside the collar, marked with one word: Orchard. By sunrise, the entire task force was activated. Hale stood over Caleb's abandoned cot, her jaw locked tight. Eliza stood beside her, fists clenched. "This wasn't an escape," Hale said. "It was a retrieval." "Why now?" Eliza whispered. "Why take him back after all these years?" "Because he started talking," Hale replied, "and because he remembered something they couldn't risk." Lowell walked in carrying a flash drive. "Recovered partial footage from the outage. Not much, but you'll want to see this." He plugged it in. A flickering frame appeared. It showed Caleb in his cell, pacing. Then, at exactly 3:11:52, a flash of movement behind him, a figure entering through the secondary door, dressed in janitorial gray, a patch of white on the shoulder. Caleb didn't resist. He turned, nodded once, and walked out with the figure. He looked directly at the camera before disappearing. Later that morning, Thomas was placed into federal protection under a new identity. The boy never asked about Caleb, never spoke of him again. But 1 week later, he left something on the floor of his temporary foster placement, a drawing. It showed 2 people holding hands, a boy and a man, standing in front of a large tree with apples hanging upside down. In the corner, "We grew in the dark." Hale and Lowell sat in the back of a conference room in D.C. as the DOJ decided what parts of the Project Orchard investigation would be made public. They redacted the witness statements, sanitized the school transport orders, renamed the files. The official report referred to it only as an incident of systemic administrative failure. No mention of what Caleb said, no mention of the orchard. or the other missing buses, or the evidence buried beneath cemeteries and old rest stops. Just like that, Hale muttered. Buried again. Lowell didn't answer. He simply slid a small sealed envelope across the table. Her name was written in Caleb's handwriting. Inside, one final Polaroid. It showed the forest, fog-drenched, empty, but in the corner, barely visible, a row of children, standing in a line, facing away from the camera, each one holding a clipboard. October 30th, 2024. Location unknown. Forested region, northern Appalachians. The wind rushed through the trees like it remembered everything. Somewhere deep in an unmarked section of national forest, far from roads, far from cameras, a single path wound through the underbrush toward what looked, from above, like an old ranger outpost. But there were no insignias, no mail slot, no phone lines, just the structure. Half buried, steel reinforced, and sealed from the inside. Inside that structure, under a cracked ventilation shaft and behind rows of disconnected monitors, Caleb Wyatt stood in silence. He didn't look like a fugitive. Not anymore. His beard was gone, his hair trimmed. He wore clean clothes, gray, soft-fibered, institutional. His hands bore new scars. He looked institutionalized, but his eyes had not changed. A man stepped into the room, dressed in black, no badge, no name. Ready? Caleb didn't answer. You told them enough to scare people, the man continued, voice even. But not enough to stop us. That's why we let you go. Caleb turned to face him. You didn't let me go. You brought me back. The man nodded. You were one of our best trials, not for obedience, for memory retention. I didn't retain, Caleb growled. I survived. Same thing. Back in Richmond, Detective Hale was packing up her office. The Project Orchard task force had been dissolved. All materials sealed. The press told the public that Caleb Wyatt had escaped custody and died in the woods. His body was never found. A tragic end to a disturbed man's delusions. Hale didn't believe a word of it. Neither did Eliza. As Hale packed her files, she paused on one item, the last Polaroid Caleb had mailed her, the row of children in the fog. She had studied it dozens of times, trying to make sense of the blurred shapes, the symmetry, the body language. But something new caught her eye, something she hadn't noticed until now. One of the children, third from the left, wasn't facing away. He was turned slightly toward the camera. His face was smeared with dirt. His eyes looked directly at her, and in his hand he held something small and black, a key. 2 days later, a private drone operator scouting the forest east of Shenandoah for topography data uploaded a flagged video to the National Park Service. The footage showed a square of disturbed soil surrounded by old pine, rectangular, sunken, roughly the size of a bus. Officials dismissed it. The file was marked erosion, but the coordinates were saved. Hale did not delete them. In the final weeks of October, just before the first snowfall, Eliza Wyatt moved out of her farmhouse and into a modest apartment closer to the city. She left behind the swing set, the childhood bedroom, the woods. She kept only one thing on her new mantel, a hand-drawn picture, folded and taped back together. It showed a dinosaur backpack, a school bus, and 2 stick figures standing in a circle of trees. One was labeled Caleb, the other M.E. There was no signature, but Eliza didn't need one. November 12th, 2024. Location, undisclosed archive facility. In a sealed crate marked Retired Evidence Do Not Reopen, a folder rests beneath layers of dust. Inside, the transport log for Stone Hollow Elementary, dated October 19th, 1993. A list of 30 student names, many now marked presumed deceased. A reel-to-reel tape labeled Group 7, Vocal Conditioning, Session 3. B. A child's bracelet. A Polaroid camera, its film compartment still loaded. And one final note, scribbled in red ink on a yellow legal pad. If you found this, you're not supposed to. No one's touched it since. Or maybe someone has. But the lights in that room never go out, and the orchard never sleeps. November 22nd, 2024. Location: Shenandoah Valley, Virginia. Private land parcel near cemetery perimeter. The ground was cold, hard, but the soil gave way easier than expected beneath the first shovel stroke. It was just after 6 a.m., and the drone operator, Logan Parrish, wasn't supposed to be there. His contract with the state had ended 2 weeks prior, but something about that flagged square of earth wouldn't leave him alone. He'd lied to his wife, told her he was doing a favor for the Parks Department, but really he just needed to see. He worked in silence, wind howling through the trees. The smell of wet pine and iron filled the air as the hole deepened. He hit the edge of something solid just after the 2-foot mark. Wood, not rotten, treated, reinforced. He scraped back the dirt carefully, then saw it. A yellow panel, chipped, faded, curved slightly, and just above it, embossed in rusted white paint. Shenandoah Unified, Unit Number 56. The missing bus. Still sealed, still buried, still here. That night, Logan uploaded the GPS coordinates anonymously to a secure Dropbox linked to an independent investigator. Someone who had once covered the Stone Hollow disappearance as a rookie journalist and never stopped asking questions. They'd know what to do with it. Logan didn't sign his name, but he left a message. You were right. They buried more than a bus. In a quiet apartment outside Richmond, Margot Hale opened the anonymous tip at 2:14 a.m. She didn't call it in, didn't wake anyone. She simply printed the satellite image, circled the coordinates, then reached into her file drawer for the one thing she had never turned over to the DOJ. The drawing from Thomas, a boy and a man, under the upside-down apple tree. She pinned them side by side on the corkboard above her desk, and whispered, I'm not done.